Hi, everybody. Welcome to the third series of our Future Tech podcast series, where it's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group, interviewing, speaking to CTOs, directors of engineering, thought leaders within technology, asking them a bit about their story, thoughts on emerging technologies, and that all-important question, career advice to STEM graduates. Really pleased to have Ivan Sutherland with me today. Ivan is the engineering director at Babylon Healthcare, a global company providing affordable and accessible healthcare to the planet. So anyone who's been on LinkedIn or has tracked the business, it's one of the fastest growing companies out there as well. So I'm sure some exciting stories. And Ivan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Good to talk, Charlie.
Yeah, great. So let's jump straight in and find out a bit about your background and your story.
I guess I started out in tech by choosing a tech course at university. It seems very stereotypical that both myself and my brother studied electronic engineering at university, and my dad studied electronic engineering. My sister studied history, and my mum studied history. So we didn't fall very far from the tree in that respect. So, so I started out with on an engineering degree. I guess I found it somewhat dissatisfactory in the first year, and almost swapped to psychology and philosophy, which would have taken me in quite a different direction, as you can imagine. Luckily, I think I didn't make that choice. So after the first year, the course broadened out, and I got to focus on computer science. And that I found that much more interesting, much more fascinating area to work. So I guess I describe my career as having sort of three lives. My first life was from from C developer to CTO. So from C developer at a small software house in the city in London, through JP Morgan to a .com, where I became CTO. That was 14 years later. I finished up at the .com. But in that I've done a lot of different roles. So in the startup, in the software house where I started, I did development, obviously, testing, project management, architecture, business analysis, all the different things, all the different functions that go into sort of building software solutions. And obviously, I saw three very different sort of companies. So a software house or software consultancy, a big financial services company, global, and then a small startup. So that was my first life. After we sold the company, I took a couple of years out. So I wanted to live life differently. I went to Spain to endeavor to learn Spanish at a rather older age. Not so easy as doing it when you're a baby, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And then went to Costa Rica and worked for a charity, living in the jungle, sleeping on a board, no hot water,
Wow.
rice and beans 3 times a day, working with street kids and other things. Then I worked as a sort of photographic assistant on a photo shoot for H&M. In Mallorca, as it happens, randomly, as these things happen. Friend of a friend, and photography was a bit of a passion of mine, etc. So that was 2 years doing something that was, obviously life very different from working in tech in the City of London type thing. Then I came back. I reached out to a woman who'd been CEO of the .com I was working at. She was then MD at Lloyd's TSB Corporate. I went in for a sort of 5-week piece of work, and they ended up keeping me for as a contractor for a year almost. My second life was as a contractor, primarily interim assignments, so sort of working 18 months and then taking 6 months off to do other things. And in the middle of that, the financial crisis was at its peak. I seem to have lived through 2 crises.
Yeah.
But, no wars yet, thankfully, but 2 crises. So I did an MBA in the middle of that. So after 10, 11 years of working as a sort of contractor, which was great in many ways, but I guess I missed the emotional engagement in work that you get when you're a permanent employee, and I wanted to be and I like finishing what I've started. So as an interim, particularly where you're there sort of a gun for hire to fill a slot while they make a decision about whether they want to make a permanent hire or waiting for a permanent hire or doing a reorg or whatever it is, then I missed I missed that emotional engagement. But I got obviously some freedom to work with lots of different employers after only working for 3 previously, and also taking out time and having a work-life balance that was different. And I guess there's financial compensations too. But so after 10, 11 years, I decided that I wanted to pivot back into permanent work and go back to startups. So I tried a couple of startups before Babylon, and I joined Babylon about almost exactly 11 months ago, so last November, after being to the Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, very good.
Which was great. I thought we didn't win, but it was great anyway. So I chose Babylon because I love their mission. You know, as you sort of stated, Babylon's mission is to provide, affordable and accessible healthcare to the whole planet. Which in my MBA, I'd done my MBA thesis was a hospital in North London on the sort of a patient journey through diagnostics. And so I'd always had a little plan. I'd obviously spent a lot of my career in financial services, but I'd always had a desire to work in something a bit more meaningful to me, at any rate. And I'd sort of experimented a bit with healthcare, but didn't find that the opportunities within the NHS. Although I followed my MBA thesis with a 18 months or 15 months or so contracting with an NHS, the same NHS hospital. So that's why. So I wanted to get back into healthcare for those reasons, and I also love the tech. And Babylon offers a sort of complete range of tech in the sense that it's all in the cloud for starters, and that it covers the whole artificial intelligence, machine learning, data side of things, as well as mobile, web apps, and back-end microservices. So it seems to offer me both sort of a really meaningful mission, and great technology to work with, and to be part of the startup. Although Babylon, as you mentioned, has grown to 1,800 or so people over a period of 4 years, and it's really rapid growth. Although the growth has sort of slowed slightly now, but really rapid growth. And I wanted to be part. I like to be part of that sort of startup story again. So that's what took me to Babylon, really, and here I am.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, what a story! And what I loved about that is actually what you're living proof that you can change careers, or not change careers, but you can have proper breaks. You know, life is for living, isn't it? So although you need a career, to be able to have the confidence to have a career break, do something totally different, and come back again.
It is. I mean, I was fortunate in that circumstances allowed it, and that I didn't have a family and wasn't tied to sort of being in the UK and that sort of thing. But even taking time, you don't need to take time out and spend it abroad. You can take time out and do other stuff. I think it's, if the truth be told, then I was probably slightly cavalier with it at times, in that it is a risk. That people should be aware that it is a risk, in the sense that, for 2 reasons. One is that people, if you have a gap on your CV, then some people see that as a problem that you have to explain. Recruitment agents and employers potentially, and also obviously tech moves very, very fast. So if you take a big time out, then it's you miss stuff, and you have to. It's more, you have to work harder to get back at it. But for me, obviously, there was a balance there, and I sort of managed to pick my way through the sort of those issues without it being too impactful. And so, for me personally, obviously, well worth it, because I got to do things that many people don't get the opportunity to do, and really enjoyed doing it, and seeing a completely different side of life in a completely different place with completely different challenges.
Yeah. And thank you for that, because actually that is valid. That technology really does move at a million miles an hour, especially in the common day or current day. So yeah, it is that balance and being able to keep a breadth of it. And so that probably leads us quite nicely into the next part, where we think about emerging technologies, and as you said, with Babylon having everything from AI and VR through to mobile applications, all in the cloud, you've probably had quite a lot of exposure to the emerging world. So what excites you, or when you think about emerging technologies?
Well, I guess I'd start slightly differently, and I'd in the sense that, before answering that question directly, in that for me, it's I've always been I love tech, but I've always been motivated by what the tech enables you to do, rather than just the tech itself. So you should never work in tech and just be proposing solutions just because it's new tech. You should be looking to see what the tech enables you to do better for your client, the patient, whoever it is that you're serving, etc. And also, the best tech is not necessarily the best tech. The best tech is the most appropriate tech. So, and my example for that is that Babylon, as I said, is a global company, and its mission is global. And so for the last 4 years or so, Babylon has been providing primary healthcare to the people of Rwanda in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as serving the NHS and other markets in Asia and the US. And obviously, for people who don't know, the principal offering from Babylon was to be able to do virtual consultations on your phone with a doctor, 24/7, etc., without having to be there, obviously, in person and traveling, etc., which is obviously very useful in this time. But that is, but with sort of AI tools. But obviously in Rwanda, the people there don't have smartphones. So you have to use the sort of USSD, which is a system that allows you to punch in sort of codes on your feature phone and get access to Babylon services that way, and have a voice call with the doctor. And if you do need to go into a surgery to see the doctor, then you basically walk the 20 miles across the jungle or savannah or whatever the terrain is in that part of Rwanda to get to see a doctor. So they also didn't have AWS. So therefore, there's we had to sort of choose a different provider for the infrastructure and use a different way of deploying the services so they weren't the latest tech. But that aside, obviously Babylon's offering is based on use of artificial intelligence and machine learning and chatbots and virtual video telephone calls to provide a service, and that is all sort of fairly emerging technology. You do have to be, particularly with AI and stuff, you have to be very careful that you understand what the models are, why the models are giving you the answers that they're giving you, that there's no bias in the models, from whatever can cause that bias. You need to be very well aware of that possibility and make sure that's not there. And obviously, it's a highly regulated environment, so we have to go through lots of hoops to make sure those things are all true. Okay. But that said, it's in this world that we're living in now, healthcare is ever more preeminent, and the world is moving towards a much more, the population's getting older, they're living with more complex conditions, and therefore giving people healthcare is getting ever more expensive and ever more difficult for governments, and as people are getting sicker as well. So it is so by leveraging off the sort of the new emerging technologies like AI and machine learning, we can give a circle of care to our patients, which starts with AI, with things like health check, monitor, chat, and stuff like that, then goes through virtual consultations to physical consultations. And we're also focusing on, rather than in the US particularly, it's like people pay for a appointment, whatever it is, and a much better model for the world in general now is a more it's the outcomes you want. You want preventative medicine, a preventative approach that gives patients as many healthy days as possible.
Yeah.
So that's what we are trying to do now in some new initiatives with people around the world, including the NHS. And so the technology that so we've gone on a journey which is always evolving. So we, as I said, we're cloud first. We initially went to market before I joined, obviously, with a Ruby monolith. Right. And that was we're gradually hacking off bits of the monolith, and we're well into a journey of retiring the Ruby monolith for Java microservices on the clinical care side, and it's all it's Python on the sort of machine learning, data science side, etc. So that's one journey. So all of that. So running microservices is a very different operational demand than running a monolith. And so we use AWS, we use Kubernetes, we use Istio as a service mesh to help us monitor and secure those services. So that's so one thing is that journey from monolith to microservices is a really interesting one and a challenging one. We have moved also from native mobile apps to React Native, which is a technology that's been around for a few years, and it's more mature now. Shall we say? Not, it's been around for 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 years maybe. It's getting more mature now. So now it's time that we felt it's a good time to adopt it. So we're on a journey again with our native apps that are migrating those from native to React Native, which is another challenge, but we believe it will allow us to be more agile and deliver better service to our patients, because we won't have to write a lot of the code. We won't have to deploy to 2 different platforms essentially. Yeah. We are also moving on to a more event-driven world. So we making more use of sort of Kafka and a sort of a distributed CQRS sort of pattern to make all of the healthcare data that all of our apps need and that we consume from third parties available to the organization, and then available to other organizations that we have to interface with. Because obviously a lot of healthcare providers have their electronic medical record system, EMR systems, and we need to interface with those to consume information and also to pass information to those. Yeah. So but it's always it's interesting to me how companies make technology decisions and bring on board new technology. So and I think that has to be as open and collaborative, and it's honest and open dialogue is always key in any in any good culture company with good culture. And so we have a sort of bi-weekly architectural forum where people write 2 pages on things they want to do, whether that's new technology they want to bring in or designs for an architectural approach to a problem they're trying to solve, etc. They put it into a sort of Slack channel. People comment on the sort of Google Doc that's there, and then it gets brought to the architectural forum for more for deeper discussion if need be. But so the way that obviously in a sort of stereotypical microservices approach, then each squad has absolute has freedom to bring in what technology they want to in order to meet the need that they're trying to solve for. But there needs to be some sort of guardrails on that, I think. So therefore our guardrails are that we want to do our back-end development in Java or Python, and that we want to use Postgres as our database where possible. But that doesn't mean you can't go outside that. It just means you've got to have an argument for doing so.
Yeah. And
because there's always the thing that's great about tech is that there's never one right answer. It depends. So so you need to understand the context and the constraints as when choosing your tech. So it's always that means there's always an interesting debate, and so an interesting debate. Do we introduce Node.js into our into one of our allowed backend languages, because we're basically, by introducing React Native and having React as on our web app, we basically have JavaScript. We could have JavaScript top to bottom of the stack if we had Node.js on the back end.
Yeah.
That comes at a cost, though, in the sense you need to support another skill set within the organization. Although there's some transfer, obviously, if it's all JavaScript, but still. So then you have a healthy debate about whether that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And you have a healthy debate about whether CQRS is the right design pattern. No, because that means that the data that you're storing in your distributed store is sort of eventually consistent, then that does not necessarily, eventually consistent might mean 2 or 3 seconds delay in getting it written to the read store, but that does mean that that may not be appropriate for all use cases. Yeah. So all these things happen in a way that is positive, healthy, and intellectually stimulating, I think.
Yeah, and again, that relates to your very first comment, doesn't it, about emerging technologies? It's actually what's the most appropriate technology, not necessarily the newest. So again, I think that's a great example of how you're doing that with your teams. Mm-hmm. And the debates, I can imagine, you've probably got everyone from millennials who do want to just work on the latest tech and need to understand that it needs to be the most appropriate, and maybe people who've worked on a specific tech that need to be developed into something new at times.
Yeah, so obviously, it's always difficult transitioning. So sometimes some tech decisions are more impactful than others. So obviously, moving to React Native from native, so people who have invested a lot of time in learning, in learning sort of, Kotlin, Swift, or whatever, and now wanting to, some of them, it's difficult to move everybody in a pain-free way to a new platform. And from Ruby to Java, then again, there's you do find people who want to stay just in their skill set. And so you can't always bring everyone with you when you make those sort of decisions as an organization. And obviously people make mistakes when they make those sort of transitions. Yeah. But I think that one of the things that I was going to say to people who STEM graduates, whatever, is don't fixate on a particular language, because languages come and go.
Yeah.
And also you are far more useful as someone who is able to solve problems.
Yeah.
Okay. So be a polyglot. So you can solve a problem in a number of different languages, and there's it's to get involved in religious wars about one language versus another language is sort of misses the point a bit. It's you can have those debates and they're sort of interesting up to a point, but essentially I'd just say be flexible, be open. Yeah. And don't just fixate on one particular thing. Learn about lots of different things and find out what interests you most, and also make yourself as useful and broad a tool in the toolbox as you can be, because that will make you very attractive to employers.
Oh well, fantastic! Because literally that was what we were going to move on to, wasn't it? The pockets of advice for STEM grads, and I think you just articulated that really well. The polyglot engineer is, and I speak from the recruitment side of things, is so relevant right now. That the ability to continually learn and be someone in tech who doesn't fixate on one technology, but appreciates the bandwidth of the ever evolving. Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree with you more.
Right.
And so with that being one really good piece of advice, have you got one more bit of advice that you would offer our STEM listeners when, thinking about their first career moves into the real world?
Don't chase the money. Look for where you can learn most. Okay.
Yeah.
But there's a little story I could tell, which is basically my first 2 jobs, which were a long time ago. One offered me £500 a year more than the other one, which was a good chunk of the salary. So you can see how long ago that was.
Yeah.
I chose one because it was closer to home by about 10 minutes on the tube, and £500 a year more. The other one was a little startup that went on to be the first handheld computing company called Scion. And if I'd joined them, then I might have been sitting on my yacht in the Caribbean right now. But seriously, just don't just look at the money. Look at going to a place where you can learn the most, and with a culture that you think you're going to connect to most. And then be humble. Learn as much as you can. Use your knowledge to help others as much as you can, and the team, and and embrace a challenge. Those are some other things I'd sort of say.
What great advice, and what a great way of being able to make it relevant about which companies to choose. Saying that, I think in all of our lives, it's like sliding doors, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You can never really fixate on the decisions you didn't make, but it's great to remind yourself that it's not about the money, but to find the right business and culturally where you fit. So, Ivan, thank you so much. That's been really, really interesting and great to hear also what Babylon's doing in terms of their technical advancements and the Rwanda through to Asia, through to the States. I can only imagine the different complexities and the challenges that you guys have as a tech team as well as a business.
No, and it's great. Like I say, those challenges are what makes I was to say going into work enjoyable, but no one's really going into work at the moment as such, physically anyway. But and good to speak to you. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody. So that's been another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. As our 16 partner universities, the footage is shared on your careers portal, and the full podcast is on the Arrows Group Spotify. So for another episode, thank you. Thank you again to Ivan.
Thank you.
Till the next one.